Hello, everybody. Welcome to this ICN2 Open Access Week event. We are very happy that you are here. We have some people here at the Institute and some of you on the net. Let me introduce you not the speakers, because we will be just debating, but the people participating in this debate. In one hand, Ignasi Labastida from the University of Barcelona. He is the head of the research unit of the CRI, the Center for the Research Center for
Learning and Research Center.
Yes, Learning and Research Center, and the delegates for Open Science for the rector of the university, and also Miguel Benítez, who's program manager at the BCAM, the Basque Center for Applied Mathematics, and also the chair of the SOMMa Open Science Working Group. So thank you, both of you, for being here, for sharing this moment with us. Now we will see the movie, Paywall, the Business of Scholarship. You have several options to see it at home. You can still be on the webinar, and we will be screening the film. Otherwise, you can follow the link that we will be sharing in the chat, and then you can see it on your own from the internet. The film is about 1 hour and 5 minutes, so we will be seeing the movie for this time. We will have a little break of 5 minutes at the end of the film, just to reseat ourselves and everything, and then we will start the debate. So thank you very much, and see you in 1 hour. Hello, welcome again to this event. Maybe some of you has just connected us right now. So I will introduce again our invited to the debate. So now I will change the order. First of all, Miguel Benítez, who's the program manager at the Basque Center for Applied Mathematics, and also chair of the SOMMa Open Science Working Group. And secondly, Ignasi Labastida, who is the delegate for the rectors for Open Science. And well, we just finished the movie. For me, it's a movie that always brings an opinion on everybody. So we can just start with your feelings of the film, and afterwards we can start talking all about it. So do you want to start?
Yes, please. Well, I've seen the movie 3 years ago. In fact, we broadcast the movie in a cinema in Barcelona. And I think, as we were saying, that it's a movie that probably all researchers, all people in the academia should at least see once. It shows the current situation of the scholarly publication system. It has changed a bit because it's 3 years old, but I think the message is there. There is a lot of money in this business, and we are not aware about it. And I think that's the main point, that we need to be aware of all this system to think how we can change it. And I think we are on the way of changing things, but we're still far away of the ideal system that we would like to have.
What do you think?
Completely agree. So this is, I think, this is the one of the first steps to the near future, and also I think it's one part of the problem right now in the currently this we have another thing inside. This is the data science, and it's behind of this kind of problem. And maybe, you know, in this, as Ignacio say, in these 3 years, these companies, they are right now, they are providers, no librarian. So they changed the objective. And I think that this kind of they are moving on the problem to continue on the business, and I think this is a real problem.
I might say, because I felt a bit interpelled when they asked, what do you think about Elsevier? And I would like to answer, because I think Elsevier is a very, very smart company. Mm-hmm. And I must say, they are much smarter than us, because they caught us. It's like we are like addicted to Elsevier, but not just to the journals. We are addicted to all the infrastructures. We use Scopus. Yeah. We use new tools like Pure. We use Mendeley data. They are clever. They are very clever, because they know the system is changing. You just mentioned data, and they are just offering more and more tools, services for research. So maybe they know that this system of paying for reading will change, and I think soon we'll see the change. But they have established other systems that we still need to rely on them. And that's, I think, what really worries me for the near future.
Yes, it is. But on the other hand, I think that the education of our master student, PhD student, not only the senior people, that they know as well how it works, or we suppose that he knows as well. But I think that we should provide like courses, like I don't know how to say, but like actions, task on the way to learn on that, to show the business, because it is a funny situation.
Yes, I think we can. I mean, we can learn from something. And for instance, we have this bad news or sad news about what's going on in the university just next buildings, yeah, where they have no access. They had a huge attack on the systems. So I would like to ask them, especially the researchers, how are you dealing now to find the papers, or to, because maybe we'll see that there are other solutions and they're still looking for the papers, looking for information. Because I remember many years ago when Elsevier cut the access to Germany universities or research centers, they realized that during a month, there was not a revolution in the universities or the research center. Nobody was putting on fire there because they had no access. So probably because they are smarter than us, they decided to go back with the access, because they realized that, careful, because without access, people is still doing research. People is still accessing to the research papers or other kind of information. So it would be interesting to know how they are doing things. I don't know if they are just going to Sci-Hub or they are using other things that I think that from my part, we've been working, for instance, with repositories, with really interesting things like Paywall, open access button, things that the ones we believe that there are other ways of opening information, we are pursuing to use. So I don't know, maybe we need to knock to the door and ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the other hand, let me come back to the education to how to provide this kind of new tools in order to for the researcher understand this is not a new management task on their a lot of list of tasks to do on their to-do, in terms to apply for research, apply for projects, blah blah blah, and also put a PDF file on this kind of repository. No, to try to understand which is the things that behind on this kind of.
Yeah. we have some comments here. So Pedro first.
Okay.
Okay. Briefly.
Let's see, they know me. Well, first of all, thank you for this initiative. I enjoyed very much watching the documentary. I could say I knew everything about it. No, not really. Qualitatively, nothing surprised me. I know all of this. But from a quantitative point of view, it's quite interesting to know better the system. So it's a very good initiative. Now, qualitatively, I have always explained to my students, scientists, we are the trade working for free around us. Nobody does that. We are the most used trades. We work for free for everything. And this is an example. But the question or the after that comment, my question would go into the alternative. We have open science. We all know more or less qualitatively about open science, and we need to cover costs of publication. So that is why we would need to pay. But we would be, as a scientist, researcher, I would be shifting my paying for reading for my paying for publishing. And of course, maybe in the intermediate, it might be a problem, but eventually my funding fathers will take care of that, so no problem. But couldn't we be shifting the problem anyway? I mean, right now, if you go open science, there are prices and prices. I mean, how do we make sure that they are just covering expenses? Actually, no business will just cover expenses. So the open science publishers are also playing their cards with prestige in the same way that the others did. How could we avoid that?
Well, there are some initiatives trying to solve this. For example, in fact, the European Commission launched their own publishing system that is Open Research Europe, that is an open portal for scientific dissemination, not only for papers, but also for data, or they start also sharing project proposals. So you submit what you expect to do and you review it on that. And the thing is that in that kind of initiatives, peer reviewing is also open, it's also public. So you can be reviewed by anyone that is logging into the system, and the review is open too. So all the system is shifting to open,
more transparent.
More transparent. And in that particular case, it is accessible free of charge for any result of a European funded project. So the Commission is taking care of the cost directly with the system, not through the scientists, but directly. I'm sure this is maybe not the best case, but this is one initiative in a while, and I agree that the system is shifting to another thing, and we not only need to find these other ways to publish, not creating too much profit for the other, but we need also to be careful on what current publishers, private publishers are doing to maintain their cuts on the research system, because this is for me, this is the real problem. The problem is that a lot of money that could be funding research and creation of knowledge and creation of well-being is going to fund some few private companies. And this is mostly public funding. And this is what we should be aware of. What should be worried on what are we doing with this? Because I'm pretty sure that we will find the way to share our knowledge in another way. But we should also be aware that we are not being also chased by the private profit company.
I have some radical ideas, but I will keep them for the second round.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would like to ask you what you think about a topic that came up in the movie. Somehow the access to publications is, we're moving not very fast, but we're moving towards open access. But there's they say in the movie that it's not as fast as we would like, because academia is very slow to change. And they did mention something which I personally think it's very crucial, but they only touched on it, and it's what they call the reward system. And even though there's the DORA declaration, and even though there's a slow change towards evaluating research in a different way, my feeling is that it's very, very slow. And I wanted to hear from you how you see this part, because my feeling is that they're both very, very tied one to the other. I mean, we are not going to go into open access, real open access, if the reward system does not change.
Yes and no. For one hand, I think with all this wave of transformative agreements that we signed in Spain, but have been signed in different countries, and some countries are already with the second wave of transformative agreements, we are moving to open access. However, we are paying almost the same. I mean, Spain last year, universities and CSIC spent more than 24 million, and I can disclose that without problem, 24 million euros for reading Elsevier journals. And other journals were kept apart from also from Elsevier portfolio. This year, we'll pay the same, and we will save 800,000 euros that were paid with the hybrid model. And probably that money will be saved for the funders because the ones who were paid. So now we'll have more than 5,500 papers open access. So we'll have it open access, we'll have it in, let's call it, prestigious journals. So the money is moving from one side to the other side. And thus the research assessment could be the same, because you will publish in that journal, no problem, will be open access, so it's okay. But I think we still pay a lot. And as just Nuria mentioned, there are other options, the platform, other platforms like the Wellcome Trust, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc. But here, and it was mentioned in the movie, is where we have the research assessment. ANECA, ACU, La Agencia, ACU and Agencia have signed DORA. We'll see what it represents. All these evaluation agencies, how they're gonna evaluate a paper in this publishing platform? Because there is no quartile, there is no impact factor, and there will never be quartile or impact factor because they are committed not to do so. So if I have a project from the Commission and I freely decide to publish in that platform, is the ANECA or the ACU or even my own institution will tell me this is zero? That's what really concerns me. And for instance, when we are asking PhD students, oh, you can have your dissertation with a compilation of articles, but there are some rules. And in that rule, it says it must be first quartile, second quartile. So we sometimes blame these agencies, but there is some work that we can do at home. And we can change those things at home. Because if not, we still rely on these big companies. And the big companies know that we soon will not pay for reading, but we'll pay the same for publishing. So for them, they will have 37 or 35 or whatever profit they have at the same time.
Yes, so completely agree. The DORA declaration is the first step, but this is not the only step. So maybe first of all is to think about why the funders and the agencies that they are trying to evaluate need a formula to check, need a number, number 1, 2, 3. Why? Maybe the evaluation should be in another way. If I remember well, the informatics panel in the national agency, they in informatics, maybe you know, they let me introduce to you this experience very fast. The informatics panel, they have like a conference paper. Conference paper is very difficult to rank the conference paper on this kind of way. So they decide which kind of conference scientifically, by the content of the conference, which one will be the first one, the second one, scientifically. No taking into account ranking numbers, H-index, impact factor. No, it's in a common agreement with the informatics panel. Maybe this is one of this kind of solution. Or maybe we should learn about how it works in a different panels, like a very small panel, like a mathematics, like a lengua, or another panels. They want to decide this kind of information.
Regarding the speed, I must say that the Commission is really committed for next year to make changes in the research assessment. Mm-hmm. They want to present a paper, a first draft of the paper next month in December. They were saying the 8th of December. And probably in February, there will be a big conference on open science in France, in Paris, because there will be the presidency of the council will be for the French. And they are committed to organize like a coalition of organization at different levels, university association, research centers, agencies, whatever, to really commit for 2022 to make a real change in research assessment. We'll see if any from our country will join that, but not just like signing a declaration, but it's very easy to sign a declaration, but really committed to a change. We'll see. I hope some will be there.
I only had a couple of comments. First about the documentary. Comments about things that I did not like. One is this particularization of this focusing on Elsevier. Elsevier is one more publishing company that does what every single publishing company does, which is to try to maximize their profits. Incidentally, that's what any company does, which is to try to maximize their profits. So a criticism of Elsevier ultimately is a criticism of capitalism, and I guess that goes beyond the scope of this roundtable. But I'm trying to understand why we resent the maximization of profits on that company and not in general. Second, I resent the fact that open access is presented as the panacea, when in my experience, as you have just said, it's just a shifting of the source of money. I think publishers are extremely happy with open access because now they can guarantee their income. We will pay to publish instead of pay to read, but we will still pay. And in fact, that also creates a bit of a funny situation whereby scientists are no longer working for free. We're actually now paying to work. We're paying to publish our own papers in journals in a way. Well, we're not paying individually, our institutions are. And so when open access is discussed, I think we should discuss the model of open access. And that was not done in the documentary. Paper published is something that we should critically look at, whereas free repositories is something that I value. And I regard SciHub as a trigger of this revolution, because it made all publications free. And I think that's why now companies are moving to open access, precisely because they see the previous model under threat from this SciHub revolution. So I think this beneficial role, what it was initially beneficial role of SciHub, is not sufficiently emphasized. The last point that I would like to make has to do not so much with the business model, but with the model itself of scientific publishing, which is not just gatekeepers in the economic sense, but also gatekeepers in the sense that you have anonymous referees and you have only 2, at most 3 anonymous referees per paper, which lends itself, in my experience, occasionally to trolling. I personally would favor a model in which you can put your paper in the archive for free, and anyone with an academic affiliation can comment. Because then all the comments are there, they're all signed, and you can repay them. And it also, it's more self-correcting, more agile in that respect. And I would like to see discussed possibilities.
In fact, preprint is the new topic in open science to foster this movement. Oh, sorry.
I fully agree with your comments. In fact, I remember the first time I saw the movie, I said the same. Why Elsevier? The rest are also bad the companies too. And my experience the past year making negotiations with the publishers, with the big ones, I must say Elsevier is not the worst. So I fully agree with that. What you said about the new system, I always said that transformative agreements are not the end of the discussion. It's a step further, because then we start to discover how much we pay, and to discover, I always said, people thought that, well, somebody will pay for reading, but we didn't know how much. And there are numbers saying that probably if we were only paying 2,000, that I think it's a lot, per paper, we will pay half of what we pay now for reading. So there are some numbers from the Max Planck Society saying that we pay around 8 billion euros, the American billions, and publishing for 2,000 per paper, we will only pay 4 billion. So that's something that also needs to put it into the table. I agree with your system, and it's the system that the Commission is proposing, saying, send me the preprint, put some names of affiliated, so academic or whatever we call it, and then everything will be transparent, will be an open peer review. There are some debates on that, because people say, well, you know, how you're gonna say things that maybe with an anonymous way, you will say more freely. There is a discussion, and there are people in favor and people against it. Wellcome Trust, I think they've been trying this system for more than 3 or 4 years. I think we have to end in some place like that, but then maybe we will not need journals, because there is a proposal, it's called PubFair, saying why we don't publish in our own repositories, in our own infrastructures, and then we start building some layers on the top. I want a paper to be reviewed. Oh no, I want a paper just to be published or disseminated. And then you will pay for services on, for instance, review, on evaluation, on whatever. So that's a proposal that is already in the table. It was proposed, I think, 2 years ago. But again, for that, we need to start changing the assessment. Because if we don't change the assessment, we cannot make and play around with these new structures.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on this issue of whether we're going to spend more or less, or maybe the same, we're going to open access. I don't know what is the numbers, but I think that there is a clear advantage in publishing open access, even if we pay even more. I mean, I don't care if the publishers get more money. But in open access, everybody will access the science. And all these problems we are hearing in the documentary of people not affiliated or people in poor countries or even in institutions which are not very poor, but it's impossible to pay for all the journals right now. So this will resolve. And I wanted to make a point about something you said, which is the very special nature of our profession. Many years ago, as a very good friend of mine told me that we are the only profession in the world in which we are employees, but we are not provided with the means of production. When you get a professorship, you don't get the money to do the research. You just get your salary, and you have to bring all the resources to your own institution. So this is just an extension of that. I mean, now we are paying to publish. So we are a very special profession. So we are taking advantage of that.
Yeah.
Just a comment on what you said. From the point of view of a, let's say, a rich or half-rich country, it's fine because you open your knowledge. So open access is good. And you said, well, I don't care too much if I pay or not. But we have to be aware of other countries. If they cannot, if we establish this as a default, maybe there are countries where they cannot afford, or maybe there are institutions, even in your country, they cannot afford those prices to pay. So that's the problem also of open access. If we put the prices, if those companies want still to earn a lot of money, they are using some prices that for me are too much. I was discussing the other day with people from Colombia. They are now negotiating with Elsevier, with Springer Nature, and they told me how much they pay for reading. If they want to flip and to pay the same and to publish the 1,000 papers they publish, they will pay almost double that what we pay in Spain. And that really surprised me. And I said, you cannot flip that way, because each paper will cost you, and now I'm going to say a figure that is not exactly, but it was almost 5,000 euros. So I told them, you are paying too much already. So you have to start negotiating by saying below. And that's the point that we play like a poker game, because the only strength we have is to say, and if not, I cancel. And that's something that we are still not brave enough. Maybe because we are too conservative, but we are not brave enough to say we cancel. In other countries, Germany, Netherlands, Sweden, they did it. And I was in favor of doing it and say, let's do it. But it's a responsibility. And I think we, as an institutions, we are ready to provide solutions. If one day we say, this is enough, we cancel. Maybe when the APCs, this is what we pay for publishing, or even the transformation on how much we pay now for reading and publishing and how many papers we publish. If we feel that maybe 3,000 is too much, we have to just stop and say, we cancel. And Sarah mentioned, she's Sarah Roney, that she was attacked as Altmetrics, but now is in PLOS. She mentioned that in the movie. We need to start telling the publishers, we cancel.
Yeah. And also to share how much it costs for every of us, because they got the power by giving us very few pieces of information.
That's something that has
what
changed.
The prices are.
That's something that has changed because there is a registry called ESAC, ESAC. You can go there and go ESAC, and you'll see a lot of information about all these transformative agreements. We just published last week the agreements in Spain. So then you'll see how much we will pay for the next 4 years, because most of the agreements are for 4 years till 2024. You'll see how many articles are covered, so you can easily transform the prices. And you can compare those agreements with other agreements that are available there. So the German, the Dutch, the Hungarian, the Norwegian, etc.
But this is the question, to share this information, bring us the opportunity to negotiate. And bring the Colombians colleagues negotiate with, no, because otherwise you cannot, you have not a position on what to negotiate with publishers.
And that's the other thing that we, for instance, at the European level, we have a meeting at the European University Association. We have a group of negotiators, and I could say we cover quite a lot of countries in Europe, and we meet a couple of times a year, and we share that, and we explain each other how much do you pay, how much they are, what is Wiley or Springer Nature or Taylor and Francis offering you, in which conditions, and they already know that we are talking, so they less and less can cheat too much on us, because they know that there is this conversation going on. Another initiative that also helps to do that, and it's broader than Europe, is the Open Access 2020 initiative, the one supported by the Max Planck Society, that allowed us also to talk with the colleagues in Colombia or the colleagues in California, because California also, the University of California decided to cancel. And what we are discussing now, it's another interesting thing, is how we allocate the cost of publishing. Because that's another issue. I mean, we pay a lot, we pay sometimes at the national level, and we share the cost in a different way before when we were reading. We said we were using sometimes the size of the institutions, the number of potential readers, maybe you were using also historical expenditures. So there are many factors. But now even the publishers are telling us, well, our cost is the cost of publishing. So we need to share in a different way and to reallocate the cost. And that's what we have done in Spain. And in next year, we'll see the changes. And some institutions will pay less, and some institutions will need to pay more. And some institutions that currently do not pay, they will need to think how we want to get used of these deals, new deals, if we cannot transform, because zero transforms to zero. Yeah. So it's something that we have to think about it.
Yes, so it is. So regarding to the cost, should be distributed properly, and I completely agree. But again, let me come back to the manner to how to this kind of open access will be impact on the indicators to be evaluated for the researchers. So maybe this is the key point, because we need to show to the research academia, because this is the real I think this is the real change. How will which is the, let me say, formula in terms to show to the researcher to adapt in this kind of new things. So I think this is the real situation, and I think this is the new discussion to take into account in the near future. So the manner to evaluate the researcher and the PhD student.
Any more comments?
Yes. Oh yes, plenty. As a matter of fact, I announced you already. I'll share with you my radical idea.
Perfect.
It's very radical, so but maybe
it will be welcome for sure.
Yeah. Maybe not so much, because Ignacio, you mentioned something going on along that line. Okay, let's see. Who the idea is trying to answer two questions. Who publishes scientific research? And one surprising, who distributes it? Distribution in the 21st century. Well, our problem is that science has evolved from this 17th century. It was very well explained when science was made by aristocrats, essentially, very fine cultivated people, and for free. They didn't need the money. Probably they paid for their flasks and retorts, right? But that was in the 17th century, consolidated in the 18th and 19th century with the scientific societies, but this is 21st century, and the world has changed a lot. Now, let us publish our own research. My group published the research and drops it in the internet. This is ridiculously naive, I know, and I'll tell you why. No, I'll tell you why. But the good thing is that if I do good research, I will prestige myself, my own journal, which is Pedro's journal. Of course, that will have no impact because I'm too small. As we get together and go up institutionally, we would have more impact even if we are more diluted. So my research center publishes. Okay, we are still too small. Well, Basque publishes, CSIC publishes, Spain publishes, I don't know. And here comes the problem. Who distributes that information? Load tracks of papers? No. Internet? You mean Google? Oh, come on. Then forget it. We would be having not the same, worse problem. Because we know how now it is decided who shows up in the first page of Google. So who distributes it is again a problem that has repositories. You might say what you are describing are the public repositories. No, because they look old, they look databases. They do not do selling their research. What I'm saying is a whole department of this devoted to publishing and underscoring and distributing, but distribution would need to be done through a different platform, not the Google platform, because then we would be even worse. So what platform could we establish to distribute a freely published, maybe individually, freely published research, which would prestige our own, and in a sense that will change completely the way research is evaluated, because it would be evaluated by the impact that it has. But it would be a completely different way to evaluate it and assess it.
I have the answer,
Okay.
and the answer is European Open Science Cloud. I mean, we are discussing now about this European Open Science Cloud, but
you mentioned it. That's
but
why
we are only mainly focused on data, and probably what we need to think is that our outcomes, our outputs are more than papers, and probably now our output is like a complex thing that is a combination of a paper with a methodology, with a code, with data, and maybe our research outputs need to be formulated in a different way. European Open Science Cloud is not an infrastructure. They want to be like a proxy, and they want to collect information, let's say metadata or whatever we call it. And then we'll need to have some rules to be switched to this cloud. The idea is that as a researcher, you could go there and say, I want what's new on, don't know, nanotechnology, nano devices, whatever. And then it will show. And you don't care if that comes from Basque, or if that comes from Tokyo, or that comes from Auckland, because it would be tagged. And it could be tagged probably with your choices, and also with your role. I'm a researcher in a public institution, I'm a commercial in some business firm, and then maybe the views will be also different, or the services will be also different. It's a possibility because the EOSC is still shaping and is still being formulated. But this could be an option. And isn't the idea, or the radical idea that I mentioned before, publish whatever you want. Because I, as a physicist, I must say, we are celebrating this year the 30th anniversary of Archive, and Paul Ginsberg appeared in the movie. 30 years of publishing without peer review, publishing their preprints, and physicists so happy, and mathematics afterwards, and computer scientists and other, they were so happy to know that I can go to Archive and see what's new in my fields. So these things already exist. We know that with the pandemic also these changes, radical changes with the preprint servers and the debate of the reliability of these papers. Well, that's something that we also have to learn how to deal with this information, especially journalists, that I always say that after some months, they begin to understand that that was not really peer-reviewed information. Your concern is something that also concerns me as somehow a bit responsible of my institutional repository, like the one you have now, unfortunately, not used, not possible, but you have in the Autonomous University, the DDD.
Yeah.
I don't expect that non-researcher will come to my repository, not because it's ugly or it seems like a database, or because who cares about the University of Barcelona repository except me and maybe my colleagues at the library. But what I'm really concerned is to be connected in those places where researchers go to find information. That's the reason why, I could say monthly, we send information to PubMed, this health science huge repository of abstracts, and even they have PubMed Central with papers. And we send them, look, this is your code, the PMID code, and this is the handle, like the DOI of my repository. And we send that information in a monthly basis. And if you go to PubMed to look for information, on the right-hand side on the top, you will have always a link to the original source. Usually that journal that maybe will be Paywall, it depends. And if I have that paper in the repository, you have the logo of my repository. And people can click, and for free and legally, you'll have the paper there. The same goes with, for instance, Paywall, a really useful tool that I always recommend to everyone to download it and to put it in your browser if you work with Chrome or Mozilla Firefox. And then if you go to somewhere where there is a DOI, even the original source, the journal, if that paper is in a repository, you will see a green light. You click the green light and you got the PDF. And you don't care if the green light is in Germany, if it's in the UK, or if it's in Barcelona, because what I want is to read. And that's something that we can improve. I always say that researchers sometimes complain about, oh, you know, the funders are now asking us to publish in some open access venues, and we want to keep, I remember all this revolution led by this lady from Sweden, chemistry, Lynn Kammerlin or something like that. And they were saying, we prefer the green road, the road to put a copy in a repository. Well, I support this road, but I need your help. I mean, it's very nice to complain and to say, oh, we will support the green. If you do so, please upload your papers in the repository. And this is easy. I completely against this myth that publishing in a repository is time consuming. There is a lot of work to do. I cannot now defend how the autonomous work, but I know that at my institution, it's a click. It's a click. And my recommendation for each researcher is keep your final accepted manuscript. Every time, keep that accepted manuscript and upload it to any repository. Yeah. Then we could begin to have something more open, or at
Let
least
me-
publicly for everyone.
Let me remember that this is a debate, and you are expected also to participate if you're not at the institute's venue. So if you want to participate, to comment or ask something, you can write it on the chat, or you can raise your hand, and Joanna will open your camera and microphone, and you will be with us very fast. So we have a question. How do early career scientists can contribute to open access good practices if they are not sure their CVs will be evaluated using DORA guidelines? Okay. By the way, currently at this institution and in this framework, you can be sure that you will be evaluated under the DORA declaration and DORA guidelines, just because the ICN2 has signed this, the Agencia Estatal de Investigación has signed this also, and ACU, that is the agency evaluating for university positions, has signed this too. So you can be more or less sure that these guidelines will be followed. But for sure, early researchers are the hope of the system, but also the ones that are more triggered by this, because they are really starting their career with an very unsure future assessment system. So I can understand the concern, but I think that things are moving.
Yeah.
If I may say something about this, I think this is something that the community builds. It's not something imposed on us, but it's something that how we work. So imposing the DORA criteria or ways of doing things still has to penetrate into our way of thinking. So as soon as we receive a CV for assessment, the first thing we look at is the publications. And the first thing we look at is the journals. And that's because in our minds is very strongly written which journals are important and which are not. And against that, the only thing you can do is to present your CV in a way where your actual impact is very quickly highlighted. So for instance, putting the citations. That's a very specific measure of the impact of your paper. And very few people do that in their CVs. Everybody writes the publication or the journal where it's published, but very few put how many citations each article has. So that's an example, but what I would say to people worried about this is that they have to prepare the CVs in such a way that they show their impact in a very clear manner. They don't have to expect the people that will review the CVs to do the work for them. Because people that assess CVs, they usually don't assess just one, they assess maybe 20, 30, 100 at the same time. So you have to present things in such a way that they are easy to digest and to see just very visually. So in the same way as you look at the Nature papers, then you can look at citations.
Yeah.
And citations are not as straightforward because they take time. But for PhD students, they don't have the time. So it's much more difficult to assess the quality of paper with a citation.
But there are other achievements that a
Exactly.
CV can highlight, like codes or applications. So there, the movement of open science, what it's looking for is for assessing research not only on publications, but on all the fields that fulfills a scholarly career. And this is not only publications for sure, but also data or codes or guidelines or for sure, teaching activities and everything. So the thing is that, yeah, as you said, highlighting what brings the most impact from your career to the scientific community is the thing that you need to highlight, even if it's not.
In my research area, for instance, which is related to coding, to writing codes, many people now are putting their codes on GitHub because it's an open thing that everybody can look at. And when you get the CV, you just click there and see you actually see the codes and you see how well or how bad they program. So it's very useful for us. So that's been happening only the last couple of years.
And that's why we need to change the way we ask CVs, because we don't need to tell the, researchers, tell me your 10 publications. It's better to use, for instance, outcomes or outputs in general. And then in a community where you already are used to do that, it's less difficult to make this change. But in general, I always say, for instance, the DG of Research in the Generalitat de Catalunya, when you ask for these research groups, change. I mean, don't ask just for publications. Be a bit broader.
Yes, it is. So also add a qualitative description, which is your core research, what you expect to do, and which is your done, right? But in a qualitative description, so your main achievement and so on, and of course to avoid on a big list like a 100 200 pages of publication. No, so a selection of your main achievement, and also my suggestion is your collaboration. Your collaborator is, I think this is the most important. So which is your kind of where you are moving on around the world, which is your main collaborator here, there, which is kind of research on this way.
I wanted to answer to Gabriele that, because the question was, how do early career scientists can contribute to open access good practices? So I think easily, without putting in danger any evaluation, if it's under DORA, that we don't know exactly what it means, but under DORA guidelines or in the traditional guidelines, I think there are two things that you can do easily. First, you can share the preprints of your papers, because there is no danger. I must say that almost all journals accept that the preprint is already available. So that's something that is an open science practice. And the second one is, I just mentioned before, once your paper has been accepted and has been published, upload it into a repository. If you are here in this institute, go to the repository of the Autonomous University. If you are in another institution, go to the one that your institution. And that are two things that do not put in risk any of your future evaluations. Moreover, if you have code or you have other things that you can open and share, for instance, you just mentioned GitHub or others, you can share that. And there are things that already will be seen as open access good practices, and it don't put in risk your future evaluation.
Perfect.
So let me come back to EOSC infrastructure, and let me point out one important thing about EOSC is the algorithms. It is very important. I think that the next thing to be discussed on this way is to avoid the bias on the algorithms. And I know that these kind of companies like Elsevier and this one, they are moving on to build this kind of similar infrastructures. So again, they are on the way.
Yes, I think that's another discussion we have if we are now broaden the idea, not just to open access, to open science in general. Something that is also a concern is the infrastructures. Which infrastructures are we using? because I mentioned before that we are relying with these companies that they are buying everything, and a small company there, for instance, that have a CRIS system in Denmark is bought by Elsevier, and then everybody, not everybody, that many institutions are using that CRIS system, etc. So we rely in some systems, for instance, the space or open journal systems for publishing our own institutional journals. But we are somehow, and I'm going to say a word that I said before, we are parasites. We don't contribute economically or by developing some improvements into that infrastructure. And we are really delighted with that infrastructure because there is open source, it costs no money for us, it's very useful to have a repository, to have the journals, but there is a cost. And we need, we as institutions here need to think that if we like those, if we don't want to be caught again by the bad companies, then we need to commit to contribute on the sustainability. There is another interesting project, Open Citations. They are building a network of citations because then we can have another tool, probably more transparent than the ones that we are using now, to know about citations. There is only one company that was against this project. Guess which one? The one of the movie. Because they have these systems that we rely on to know which is the impact factor, which are the citations. So if we are always complaining on that, maybe we need to support those other alternatives that are community-led, that are community-developed, but we need to support them, not just being these parasites as we try to admit.
Any more questions from? Okay, well, yeah.
I think that more than support those systems, we really need to enforce them, because otherwise, if it's an altruistic thing, I think it's not going to happen. And it goes down to the question of incentives, which you've mentioned, and Gabriele has also hinted upon. As long as there's a strong incentive to publish in Nature or in a Greek journal, or in a high impact factor journal, we will continue to do so. So I'm thinking of things that can be done at the institutional level, perhaps not at the ICN2 level, but at the European community level. Things like, for example, in a project evaluation, you cannot submit any paper. You can only submit archive papers. I say archive because it's the one in physics.
Yes.
You can only submit repository links and not actual journal titles. Unless we enforce strong measures like that, we are not gonna, I don't think we're gonna take down the current system.
I fully agree, and I have to acknowledge the Polytechnic University, the University Polytechnic of Catalonia, because in 2015, so 6 years ago, the vice rector was brave enough to say, in our internal assessment, what they gave points for your research, we will only count the papers that are in the institutional repository. They are around 90% of the production in papers of the Polytechnica is available in the repository. The rest of our institutions, we have not been yet brave enough to do that. I have been asked ANECA to do that in the month ago, a bit less than a month ago, 4 weeks ago, when they start explaining the changes in the valuation and all that, and they show this report that has been discussed a lot in the last weeks. They mentioned something that for me is an improvement. They said, in the future sexennials evaluation, we will ask that only papers in the repository will be counted for the sexennials. I hope this that was mentioned 4 weeks ago, they will have the commitment to do so in the future evaluations. Because then, as you say, we will begin to make a change. And it does not jeopardize at any moment publishing in Nature or publishing whatever. Nature, for instance, is one of the papers more flexible on putting papers in the repository. They allow you to have an embargo of just 6 months. Wiley has 12, Elsevier has more than 24 months in many journals. So I always say to my researchers, go publish in Nature, be happy, open the cava bottle, but please, I want the paper in the repository in less than 6 months.
Okay, so I think we can count it for ended. Thank you very much for being there, for being here, all of you sharing all these interesting discussion. And I hope we can repeat some event on next year's Open Access Week. But that's all for this year. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.